Imagine an icy sidewalk, in the middle of the night, empty. Except right there, sitting on the ground, there's a 7-year-old girl, Sofia, holding a piece of chalk and drawing a huge mansion, full of lights and shining windows. Next to her, her little brother Lucas, wrapped up in a blanket, whimpers softly from hunger. Sofia doesn't even blink as she draws. It's like that colorful castle is the only way out, the hope she's never really seen. But what's most shocking comes next. Enrique, a millionaire who's used to ignoring everything and everyone, storms by, furious, caught up in his own problems. Except this time, he can't tear his eyes away from the drawing. Why would a child with nowhere to sleep draw such a big house? And what she says next changes everything. I wish there was a house like this for all the kids who sleep on the street. Enrique trembles inside. He has no idea, but tonight is about to make his past, present, and future explode with meaning. What will he do now? Will he just walk on? Or will he let life change forever? Don't go anywhere. This story is just beginning. Sofia was sitting on the freezing ground, huddled up against the gray wall of a building no one ever looked at. Her skinny, scraped knees, all banged up, were tucked underneath a dress that had long forgotten what color was. The cement seemed to breathe ice. She pulled her little brother closer, wrapping her arm around him. Lucas, his eyes already drooping with sleep, was still holding himself upright, but shivering, each shiver like a drumbeat pounding in her chest. The cold was bone deep. Still, Sofia stayed, trying to forget the wind with the tip of an old, stubby piece of blue chalk. The sidewalk was damp, and almost everything around looked gray except for the places the chalk touched. There she drew, with tiny hands marked by dirt and cold, a house so beautiful it could have come from a movie, or so she thought, though she'd never watched a whole film in her life. It was a huge house, full of windows shining yellow light, and in the windows she drew smiles, happy, imaginary people looking out. On the roof, she sketched a colorful flag, the kind that only show up at kids' birthday parties and in really good dreams. Sofia bit her lip hard, not wanting anyone to hear her stomach growl. The smell of garbage nearby mingled with the smell of rain, and everything felt heavier whenever her stomach rumbled. But she wouldn't let go of the chalk, not even when her hand hurt from gripping it so tight. She wanted to finish the drawing before sleep took Lucas away completely, or before a cop came by yelling for them to leave that spot. While she drew a swing out in front of the mansion, her mind wandered. What would a house like that be like? Would there be warm beds? Food whenever we wanted? Could you laugh out loud without someone telling you to be quiet? She kept imagining. She drew a big door, no lock, just open, so everyone could come in. It was for all the children, not just her. The ones she'd seen sleeping at bus stops, on park benches. She wished everyone could have a place full of light. Now and then Sofia glanced at Lucas. The boy, only 3, all tiny and tousled hair, was almost asleep sitting up. She gently cradled his head in her lap, pretending it was a soft pillow like in her daydreams. She bowed her head quickly, almost like making a silent prayer. God, just a little more strength not to cry in front of Lucas. He's already cried too much. The street barely moved. Cars rushed past, red lights and the wet hiss of tires on rain. No one stopped to ask anything, not this late, not now that the cold had taken over the sky. But every now and then, someone walked by looking without seeing. She got used to it. It didn't surprise her anymore when people didn't notice. But on that sidewalk, that night, the drawing was turning out beautiful. Sofia started drawing colorful flowers at the windows, sketching a happy dog in the garden. She thought, if I make the garden really bright, maybe no one will notice there's a girl inside who could disappear from hunger. After every flower, she'd look at Lucas. He breathed deeply, sniffling, his grubby hands clutching the hem of her dress. His eyes moved under closed lids, maybe dreaming of somewhere he no longer remembered. Sometimes the wind hit too hard. Sofia would pull the dress up over her brother's knees, even though she knew the fabric was useless against the cold. It'll pass, just a little longer, she whispered softly, barely making a sound, not wanting to wake him or remind him of the orphanage. She hated to remember, but it was impossible to forget. Sometimes she thought she heard the sound of heavy doors, voices shouting, other kids crying quietly in the dark. That's why she drew the big, bright house to erase, if only for a moment, the fear of always waking up in a bad place. A car went by more slowly. She clenched the chalk tight, held her breath for a second. No one looked, the car vanished. When she felt invisible again, she went back to her drawing, inventing laughter where there was only silence. Time seemed to pause in little ripples. The street clock blinked red. She tried not to think about being tired. Deep inside, she had hope, though she couldn't explain where it came from. She tried to be strong for her brother, because Lucas was just so little, and she didn't want him to know the world could be this cruel. So she clenched the chalk so tight it nearly broke, just to make the garden brighter. Minutes, or maybe hours, drifted by. The drizzle turned to real rain, blurring the drawing here and there, but Sofia didn't stop. She brushed water from her face before it could mix with her tears. The sky grew darker still, and a heavy silence settled in, the kind that makes your heart beat slower. She looked at her brother again, pushed his hair out of his eyes. Whispered again, "Soon, we'll have a home, Lucas. I promise." And there, on that wet stretch of sidewalk, between hope and hunger, Sofia held on to everything. Her brother, the dream, and that drawn world, more colorful than she could ever imagine on the inside. She didn't know it, but something was about to happen. Even if she didn't believe it, her heart squeezed in a strange way, as if the whole world was watching what she was drawing for the very first time. The sound of traffic was muffled by the glass walls of Enrique's penthouse, but down below, the wind felt cold to the bone. He hurried along, cell phone wedged between shoulder and ear, his tie crooked, leather briefcase banging his leg with every brisk step. Everything about him was tension tonight, a hard mouth, eyebrows pinched into a knot, short breaths. On the other end of the call, someone poured out problems, numbers, mistakes, and he answered in a tone ready to explode. "I've already told you, fix it. I don't care how. Just do it," he snarled, voice low and sharp, speeding up even more as though running from his own thoughts. The wind stabbed at his polished shoes, splattered his pants with cold raindrops. Enrique barely noticed. The whole city could have been collapsing, and he would have kept focused on that tight knot of irritation and fear inside, the same fear he never talked about, that everything would fall apart again. Rushing like that, he saw nothing around him. Didn't notice the stale bread smell from the corner, the muffled laughter coming from the bar behind the bus stop. Didn't see the piles of trash bags or the tilted traffic cones someone tripped over last night. He just walked past it all, eyes fixed ahead. Until, suddenly, his shoe slipped on a thick streak of blue chalk. Enrique stumbled. His phone nearly hit the ground. He glanced at the spot where his foot almost gave out and finally saw. There were people there, even if nearly invisible to those who sped by. A skinny girl, round pale face, was holding a small boy curled up in a filthy coat, lying on his side. She couldn't be older than 7 or 8, but her eyes seemed so much older, big, dark, scared. And even so, when she saw Enrique so close, she didn't run. She just pulled herself in tighter, shielding her brother like an armor. He stopped, awkward, staring at them. Felt an uncomfortable churn, more than worry. It was like a bad memory getting poked in a place no one else ever saw. He remembered his own face, years ago, always tense, always bracing for some adult to lose patience and yell about nothing. Without realizing it, he frowned even deeper, trying to push that thought away. The man on the phone kept talking, but Enrique barely listened. He was lost in the girl's huge eyes. You could see the exhaustion, but they held something else, too. There was fear, shame, but also this tiny stubborn courage, like someone who'd learned to survive alone. Her mouth trembled a little, not smiling. The little boy beside her slept, or tried, with his legs curled tight. The cold stung, and both their cheeks were red, cracked from the wind. Enrique cleared his throat, uneasy. He kept trying to figure out what would make a child stay there, at this hour, like that. He crouched down, leather briefcase dangling from his arm, his expensive suit brushing against the damp ground. For the first time all night, he stopped thinking about money, meetings, results. The girl squeezed her brother's arm, spooked. Enrique saw that look, one that trusted no adults, and inside, he got it, but pretended not to notice. Nobody spoke. A cold silence pressed between them. A car went by, its headlights briefly washing over Sofia's brown hair and the colorful squiggles on the sidewalk, then gone again, leaving just dim streetlights, the damp air. Everyone's eyes locked on each other. Enrique slowly stood again. He thought about just walking away, muttering sorry as he went. Checked himself going home, lying on the sofa, forgetting. But this look was hard to shake. The way the girl clung to her brother, how she pushed past her fear just to put herself between him and harm, even though she was so slight. If someone looked real close, they'd see Enrique's hands trembling, maybe from the cold, maybe from nerves, just like the kids. The rain smell thickened, and the wind made Lucas fuss in his sleep, clinging tighter to the tiny bracelet on his wrist. Sofia absently twirled a finger in her brother's hair, learning to be a mother before her time. Enrique felt an ache, a strange squeeze in his chest, in his stomach, in his whole past. He noticed the damp soaking into the hem of his coat, felt the chill seep up from the cold concrete, but he didn't care any more about fancy clothes or missed meetings. He just looked at Sofia, looked at Lucas, tried to guess how long they'd been out there, what they'd eaten last, who, if anyone, looked after them when nobody was watching. Enrique let out a sigh, not about work or the traffic, but because of something he couldn't quite name. Pity? Maybe. Anger, too, at seeing children thrown away while he bought every comfort, a house, a car, all sorts of luxury, and still couldn't shake the old guilt of someone who'd had to fight to survive from the beginning. Some noisy person passed by on a bike across the street, laughing out loud. The sound echoed, faded. Neither of them moved. Sofia watched Enrique out of the corner of her eye, bracing for trouble or some threat, but got nothing back except a strange look. Neither angry nor exactly friendly, just kind of lost. The phone call was still open. The cell beeped. Enrique, irritated, finally hung up for real, not bothering to say anything. For the first time in a long while, the silence seemed more important than any voice from the other end. Then, standing there, he realized he wasn't going to leave the same. His features were still rigid, but not as hard. The hand gripping the briefcase, without him even meaning to, relaxed a little. He breathed deep, feeling that the cold on the outside was less chilling than the old emptiness that, tonight, for just a moment, had been pierced by a little girl's pure gaze. And that night, which was supposed to be just another, would never be the same. Enrique stood at the corner of the sidewalk, awkward, feeling the cold hit harder than before. His boss's voice still rang in his ears, but now something else drowned it out, the sound of chalk scraping the wet concrete. He looked down, almost by reflex, and froze. Beneath his feet sprawled a huge drawing, done in worn-down colors. In it, a house straight out of a storybook, giant doors, windows pouring yellow light, a garden with trees, even a slide drawn on the lawn. But the sidewalk was hard, gray. The picture was running in places, streaked with raindrops and city grime. Sofia was almost squatting, her face red with cold, hair plastered to her sweaty brow. She hadn't even noticed Enrique stop. She kept at it, focused, biting her lip as she filled in, with a stubby orange chalk, what must have been a bright window. Sometimes she glanced at Lucas, who slept half-wrapped in his jacket, using an old cardboard box for a pillow. For a moment, Enrique tried to pretend he hadn't seen any of it. He wanted to just walk on, deal with his own problems, forget there were still kids going hungry out here. But he couldn't. The drawing gripped his eyes, and more than that, the sight of that little girl, dirty knees, sketching hope onto the ground. His chest ached. He even pulled his coat tighter, fighting off the wind, or maybe a memory threatening to break loose. He took a deep breath, looked at Sofia again, saw her arm trembling with cold as she dragged the chalk left and right, taking her time. Then, suddenly, almost against his will, he heard himself ask, his voice lower and rougher than usual. Why? Why such a big drawing, such a big house? The question hung awkwardly in the cold air. Sofia slowly lifted her face. Her eyes shone, but not with joy. It was a shine wet with effort, like she was fighting hard not to cry. She looked Enrique in the eye, not with fear, but with a quiet strength, as if holding something inside bigger than the whole world. She tugged her bangs, wiped her nose, ended up smudging her finger with blue chalk. Because I wanted, sir, you know, a house like this big. But her voice faltered, as if the cold was freezing her words too. Not just for me. There's lots of kids out here, sleeping on the street. It's cold, there's hunger, everyone wants a warm house. With food, a real bed, a house full of lights, so no one ever wakes up scared again. The silence that followed could have been sliced with a knife. Enrique felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to answer anything at all, but couldn't find words. He felt exposed, like this little girl was staring straight at the part of himself he had most. It was hard. So much easier to sign a check, talk about money, pretend the world wasn't this cruel. But here, with Sofia, it was impossible to lie. She kept looking at him, waiting, but not demanding anything. Enrique looked away, but couldn't actually leave. He noticed the tiny details, Sofia's chalk-stained fingers, her skin cracked from the cold, her scraped knees. Lucas mumbled in his sleep, hugging a threadbare stuffed bear tighter. The damp asphalt smell hung in the air, mixed with the chalk's faint, sweet tang. Enrique tried to breathe steadily, but his chest felt heavy. He thought about his own childhood, tried to push it aside, but the memories hit hard. He couldn't help but see himself on this same sidewalk. For a second, he even thought of crouching down to draw alongside her, but felt ashamed. His suit seemed too tight, too much burning inside. Sofia dropped her gaze again, kept drawing, but now more slowly. It was as if all her hope was concentrated there, in that chalk roof, that patch of color. She spoke softly, almost a whisper, but Enrique caught every word. I look at it and hope that one day we'll all fit in. Everybody. No one left out. The honesty hit him like a punch. Enrique put on a show of indifference, shoved his hands deep into his pockets, but there was something different in his eyes. The way he watched Sofia, he wasn't just seeing a child on the street. He was seeing a dream, as big as that mansion. The wind gusted. An old scrap of paper spun across the sidewalk, stuck to the drawing and settled there. Enrique wanted to ask more, but felt self-conscious. Sofia adjusted Lucas's tattered coat, glanced at Enrique again, her eyes quietly begging, "Don't go just yet." Enrique took a deep breath, like a man finally making up his mind and knowing he couldn't run from himself. He thought about giving them money, but he knew it wasn't just about that. It was about finally seeing the child, really seeing all that she carried. Lucas's breathing was slow and rough, blending with the sound of a bus rolling by. On his face, chalk smudges and the hint of a smile, even while asleep. Sofia smoothed her brother's brow, full of care, then turned her gaze back to the drawn mansion. Enrique stood there, feeling an old pain, like someone who's always tried to forget where they came from, but now everything was bubbling up. In the chalk mansion, he saw a glimpse of his own past, the cold nights, the silence, the dread of never belonging anywhere. It hurt. Time dragged. He said nothing more. Watched the girl rub her chalk to a nub, draw one more tiny window. Thought it almost impossible that so much strength could come from someone so small. And he stayed there, unable to leave, listening only to the sound of his pounding heart, his, hers, all those who've ever wanted, just once, a real home. Enrique kept looking at the girl. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her. That line she'd said, wanting a huge house, not just for herself, but for all the kids on the street, rattled around his head, hurting more than he cared to admit. Suddenly the cold felt worse. The wind tore between buildings. He hunched his shoulders, just like at the shelter when he was a boy. The memories crashed in, uninvited. The sound of people shouting, the games that never really were, the old musty blanket smell. The constant sting in his gut, that certainty no one would come for you. No one would miss you if you disappeared. He looked at Sofia again. Her hair was different from his, tangled from wind and lack of washing, but her eyes, those eyes were the same ones he'd seen in the mirror on nights he'd slept alone, wondering if some adult would show up next morning, telling him he belonged, that he had a family, a place in this world. For a moment, he saw the boy curled up on the bottom bunk, hugging his own knees. Saw that little hand gripping a battered old toy car, trying to push away the fear that felt bigger than everything. Part of him wanted to kneel right here and hug Sofia and Lucas, promise no one would ever hurt them again. But another part, the harder part, the one that had learned early that showing feelings was dangerous, that letting anyone see pity, weakness, love, anything only ever meant getting hurt afterward. Enrique straightened his shoulders. His jaw tensed. He shoved his hands back into the expensive coat, stared at the horizon, tried to look like he didn't really care. Inside, he was a river gone wild. On the outside, the same old stone wall. Sofia noticed. It was as if she could feel the distance, even with him so close. The drawing still stretched at their feet, but all at once it seemed to lose its color, like the cold had drained away all the joy she tried to put in with the chalk. She looked down, then gently tugged Lucas closer. The boy didn't really wake. His light hair fell over his face, mouth open from sleep and exhaustion. He only shifted a bit, muttered something from his dreams. Sofia tugged his worn jacket up and watched Enrique, suspicious, ready to run if she needed to. The silence went on. In the background, a bus rumbled by, a dog barked somewhere far away, footsteps rushed past, someone heading home. A bad smell drifted from a nearby trash can, mixing with the almost sickly sweet smell of chalk. The wind made everything tremble, newspaper, dead leaves, grocery bags, the whole life of the street. Enrique didn't know what to do. He knew how to be a boss. He knew how to be cold. He knew how to order, to buy, to sell. But here, faced with this skinny girl shielding her brother, he had no manual, no right answer. Only bad memories and the desperate urge not to show pain. He remembered the shelter, all those icy nights, listening to grown-ups laugh in the back room. Remembered the creaking beds, the jolt when a new kid arrived. Remembered the time he tried to run away, how terrified he'd been of ending up on the street, thinking nothing was worse than the shelter, But the street was worse, yes. He looked at the drawing again. Yellow lights in the windows, huge trees, a blue pool, a smile in every window. A fairy tale mansion. No bars, no staff barking orders, no angry adults. It wasn't just a child's wish, it was the hope of somebody refusing to give up, even after all that. Sofia was quiet, but her hand gripped Lucas tight. Enrique noticed her dirty fingernails, the way she bit a finger when she got nervous. Her eyes flashed to his shoes, a quick, practiced scan for danger. He looked like any adult, and like all street kids, she was wary. Inside his chest, an almost desperate urge not to walk away. Not to be just another adult who passed by without caring. But the hardness inside him was so thick that all he managed was to step back, staring without really seeing. The cold crawled up his shirt collar, freezing him to the bone, and for an instant he was afraid of himself, afraid he couldn't be different this time. Sofia could tell. She pulled Lucas even closer, squeezed her brother's frail arm like it could keep the world out. Enrique, the street, the orphanage, all of it. Her face was clean, but with a streak of blue chalk on her cheek that looked like a tiny ray of sunlight. She stared straight into his eyes, cautious, but hoping to believe in something, even just a little. Enrique's eyes shimmered, but he blinked quickly. He forced a half smile, just to keep from looking so shaken. Thought about saying something kind, but nothing came. Silence again. A silence deeper than any conversation could ever be. The silence of children bracing for the worst, the silence of adults too scared to feel. It felt like the whole world was compressed into that stretch of sidewalk, that cold, empty night. All that remained, in that instant, was the silent hope etched in a shaky chalk line, almost washed away. Enrique stayed there on that cold sidewalk longer than he wanted to admit. He tried to swallow the strange lump in his throat, look at the distant lights and think about something else. But the image of Sofia kneeling on the sidewalk, dirty fingers with the chalk, always watching over her little brother even in sleep, wouldn't leave him. He spoke, his voice rough like someone who never makes promises. I'll be right back. Sofia didn't answer. Barely looked at him. She probably heard that 1,000 times from grown-ups who never come back, who always vanish at the darkest hour. She just cuddled Lucas, tugging the threadbare blanket up. Enrique forced himself to walk away. The cold slapped his face, his suit heavy with midnight damp, shop lights going out and traffic noise fading, the honking running together with the muffled hum of a city falling asleep. Enrique ducked into the corner bakery without even thinking about it. The warm smell of fresh bread melted some of the ice inside his chest. He grabbed whatever he saw: bread, juice, a piece of cake, savory pastries, fruit. At the register, the cashier gave him a strange look, the rushed, serious face of someone who doesn't buy groceries at this hour. He walked out with 2 bags, the weight oddly comforting in his hands, as if carrying it all made it a little easier to breathe. Back out on the street, he realized he was nervous, breathing ragged, quick footsteps trying not to seem hurried. When he got back to the colored chalk mural, Sofia hadn't left. She was curled tighter around Lucas. Her drawing was smudged by the damp, but you could still see the windows full of light, the enormous door, a few colored trees. It was a mansion built by imagination alone, with no bars, no fear. Enrique suddenly felt huge and awkward, out of place. He didn't know what to say. He just crouched down near them, his knees popping, and set the bags down by his side. He spoke softly, not looking at them directly, as if he was afraid to startle them. "I brought some food. Would you like some?" The silence grew heavy. Sofia looked at Lucas, her eyes already red, almost hard from the effort of holding back tears. She stood still for a moment, not moving at all. Lucas, so small, opened his eyes slowly, like someone waking to the smell of fresh bread. But he didn't reach out right away. He wore the wary look of a child that's already learned not to trust too easily. Enrique just took out a little bag of bread from his groceries, opened it slowly and placed it on the ground, not quite a foot from them. "Go ahead. It's okay, all right," he said, half swallowing his own voice. It wasn't the voice of a man used to asking for anything. It was the voice of someone truly trying not to scare anyone. Lucas looked at the bread and quieted even further. Then his stomach gave a loud noise. Everyone heard it. Maybe that's what finally broke through his hesitation. He looked at his sister, a flicker of hope lighting up in his eyes. Sofia barely nodded, almost unnoticeable. Lucas stretched out his hand, shaking, and touched the bread. When its smell rose to his little fingers, he gripped it so tightly it seemed he was afraid it would disappear. They didn't say thank you at first. A hungry child doesn't think to thank. They only remember the fear that the bread might run out. Sofia reached for one for herself, but kept watching Enrique, as if trying to guess what he'd do next. The way she bit into the bread was urgent, yet despite that, she split her piece for her brother in a well-practiced gesture, broke it in half, and placed one piece in Lucas's hand without a word. It was a silent dance perfected by those who never had the luxury of eating first. Enrique just watched. He didn't know what to do with his hands. It hurt, seeing all that hunger, those two eating as if they might vanish at any moment. It reminded him of old nights, his own stomach twisting in pain in the dark shelter, curled up, dreaming of hot food. He could almost smell bread mingling with cold cement and the faint tang of damp chalk. Sofia bit down again, this time quietly crying. It was nearly silent, just tears slipping down her dirty face, glistening in the streetlight. It wasn't just about hunger. It was fear, exhaustion, disbelief that this night could possibly be different. Sometimes she snuck glances up at Enrique's face, searching for signs of danger, or maybe, for just a second, simply wanting to understand why. Why would a well-dressed man waste his time on a cold downtown sidewalk with two strangers? Lucas could barely swallow. He was so hungry he nearly choked, but at the same time tried to chew slowly, desperate to make the good moment last. His eyes shimmered with relief, and he started kicking his feet softly, as if his whole body needed to believe it was all real. Enrique, in that moment, felt small. He'd thought he could keep himself from feeling too much, stay dry inside, but his eyes burned. He pretended to scratch his nose, ducked his head lower to hide the moisture in his eyes. The way they shared everything brought him straight back to childhood, his little sister splitting cookies with him on hot afternoons. It was like his whole life tied itself in a knot. The city kept going outside, distant. Cars buzzed by. Sometimes a dog barked far away, someone shouted at the bar up the street. But there, on that slice of sidewalk, everything was suspended. Just the kids eating, and Enrique trying to remember how to speak when your throat tightens up. In the end, neither child said a word. They didn't need to. Silence became shelter. The sound of bread being broken, the scent of hot coffee Enrique poured from his thermos, Sofia's sigh of relief, all of it meant more than anything they could have said. When he finally got up to leave, Enrique felt the cold settle in again. He forced a smile, awkward, and said softly, "I'll be back." This time, Sofia looked at him differently. For an instant, she seemed to try to believe him. But it was only that, a flicker of hope and fear swirling in the eyes only a homeless child has. Enrique walked away slowly, each step heavier than the last. He managed to look back just once. And there, in the dark, the two of them huddled close, eating slowly, arms wrapped tight around each other. It wasn't much, it was only bread. But for them, it was almost a miracle. Enrique was already adjusting his coat, getting ready to go, trying to flash a quick smile just to not look so out of place in front of the kids. He just left the food bag on the ground, that awkward way of someone who'd never been good at dealing with kids or with gratitude. Lucas was still chewing carefully, almost scared, pressed up tight against Sofia's side. Out on the street, the wind grew colder. The smell of warm bread mixed with the soggy asphalt from the late afternoon rain. Enrique turned, ready to head to the car, but he only managed a couple of steps. Something pulled his gaze back. Right there, under the orange glow of the streetlight, he saw Lucas scratch his arm, near the inside of his ragged sleeve. It lasted only a second, but Enrique saw it. A colorful ribbon dangling there. It was so simple, a faded blue, some lopsided design stitched in. It looked like one of those things you find at cheap street fairs, nothing anyone would notice. But to Enrique, it was like a punch to the stomach. He froze in the middle of the sidewalk, unable to move his foot another inch. For a moment, he forgot the cold, the city noise, everything. His throat went dry. His thoughts began to wrestle each other, like kids trying to explain themselves to an adult. Enrique no longer saw the city. He remembered only the bedroom he'd shared with his sister growing up. She wore a bracelet exactly like that, always on her left arm. Said it was for luck. He remembered the smell of cheap soap, her giggles when she was hiding a prank, and the awful day everything changed. His mother's panic. The house swarming with police. No news of his sister, just that missing bracelet, vanished with her. No one ever saw it again. Lucas's arm was skinny just like hers. The way he lifted his wrist looked heartbreakingly familiar. Enrique panted, rubbing his face as if to blame the cold, though his hands trembled. Sofia noticed. She didn't take her eyes off him, like she was waiting for him to do something wrong, like adults always did. Lucas crawled onto her lap, tiny there, clinging to the bread, but shielding the bracelet without meaning to. Enrique dropped his gaze again, pretending to tie his shoe, but in truth he just didn't know where to put his face. It seemed impossible. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a crazy memory from his own head, telling him it was some kind of sign. But his chest hurt all the same. He wanted to ask. He had half a mind to sit there on the curb and ask where the bracelet came from. But his voice wouldn't come, stuck with all the questions from the last 30 years. If he spoke, he'd scare them. And he could already see Sofia's fear, a fear he knew all too well, the fear of losing even the little she had left. Inside, Enrique was small again, just like the lonely boy in the big house he was adopted into, learning not to trust anyone. He thought he'd never feel that empty again, but there it was. Except this time, it was different. This time, hope sat right alongside the pain. The seconds crawled by. Lucas stretched, wiped his nose, and the bracelet nearly slipped off. Sofia looked at Enrique, half puzzled at the serious man. Paused there. He opened his mouth to speak, but only managed, "Take care of yourselves, okay?" That was it. His hand was still shaking, the cold seeming to seep into his bones. Enrique walked to his car, but when he opened the door, he stopped once more. He let his forehead rest on the steering wheel, sitting there in the dark, listening to his own breathing, trying not to cry. He hadn't done that in years. He'd always forced himself to be strong, in control, but now he couldn't. Memories hit in waves. Childhood perfume, his sister's laughter as they ran through the fields. That night she disappeared without a goodbye. It could have been any old ribbon, just his imagination. But what if it wasn't? What if, in some impossible way, that little boy, dirty, with a cheek smudged with bread, was family? Enrique searched his own pockets for a business card he didn't even know who to give to. He thought about calling the police, his assistant, anyone who might know what to do. But who could explain this better than fate itself? In his mind, the night felt endless. His phone clock seemed to freeze, the city passing slowly behind the foggy glass. Even the car headlights looked farther away. Sofia wanted to believe. Her heart thudded, mouth dry with fear, but she nodded, gripping Lucas tighter. The boy held onto her neck, too afraid to look up. Then the sound of sirens cut through the city. Still far off, but real. The men bolted, fleeing down side streets. Enrique let out a long, ragged sigh, collapsed to his knees, and for the first time, his eyes filled up, anger, relief, everything all at once. Sofia saw and understood, in her own way, that there was someone right there who felt just as afraid. Someone big, but carrying the same pain. Lucas cried openly, no shame. Sofia finally let a little weight slip off her shoulders, even with the future still unclear. She looked at Enrique, he was shaking, but for the first time, gave a real smile. A smile with teeth, a tired dad smile, but strong. At that moment, Sofia realized running isn't always about escaping. Sometimes, running is finally finding someone who'll run right alongside you. The police station felt cold in a way all its own that morning. It wasn't just chilly air seeping through the busted door or the bleak gray tile. It was a different chill in your chest, as if it scared smiles away from everyone inside. Enrique stood tall, steady, but you could see it in his hands, trembling a little, fists tight even though he probably didn't notice. He stared straight ahead at a policeman too busy to care, never breaking eye contact. Sofia sat against the wall right at Lucas's side, twisting the hem of her shirt so hard she might tear it. Nobody said anything. All you could hear was the faint hum of cars far away, and, every so often, a child's sob echoing from down the hall. The officer finally called Enrique's name, a little too loud. Enrique took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a second. You could practically hear his heart, beating too fast. He stepped to the counter, dumped all his papers on the desk. It looked heavy to him. It wasn't just paper, it was the fear of being brushed off, of no one believing. But still, he let go, and began to speak. His voice, normally so firm at work, now faltered, not from uncertainty, but as if every word had to fight its way out of his throat. The orphanage, he said, staring right into the chief's eyes, hurts the kids. They hit them, shout, switch the lights off too early. They don't take care. They make the children afraid. The man behind the desk sighed, nearly impatient, but Enrique pressed on. Showed photos from his phone, old bruises on Lucas's arm, told of fear, of their run through the dark, the cold, the hunger. They don't have anyone. I was like that, too. His voice cracked here, the silence settling thick. But nobody should go through this. No one. They deserve love. Sofia observed from a distance, as if from some corner of a room that didn't exist. She didn't know what to do with her legs, but kept fiddling with her grimy shoelace. Lucas quietly played with his jacket zipper, trying to be invisible. Time seemed slower in that place. No one knew what would happen next, everyone tired of waiting. Then a nurse arrived, holding a sealed envelope. The silence got deeper, broken only by the crinkle of plastic opening. Enrique took the sheet, his hands now shaking worse than ever, as if the secret were too much for one person. He read. Once, twice, as if the words wouldn't sink in. His face changed in slow motion, first confused, blinking fast. Then, as if something inside broke, he began to tremble, but it was from tears, not the cold. He cried openly, not caring, like a child, and it seemed like that crying was washing away years of trapped pain. He's my nephew, he managed to say, now down, almost kneeling, looking at Lucas as if staring at his own past in a tiny body. He's my sister's son. The sister I lost. His words came out in pieces. There was no space for grief and relief at once, but somehow his face managed to show both. Lucas stared, scared, not really understanding what had changed. He just knew this big man was crying over him, so he stayed quiet, glancing between Enrique and Sofia. The policeman wrote it all down, but that didn't matter right then. What mattered was Sofia, anxious, practically tearing at her own skin with worry. Her gaze darted from the paper to Enrique, to the floor, and back to him. She thought, you could see it, that it was over. That Lucas would be taken, maybe adopted for good, that she'd be left alone again. Maybe not even sent back to the orphanage, since no one wanted 2 kids. She rose to her feet, so slowly she almost disappeared. Her wide, afraid eyes pulled at Enrique's attention. He was still crying, but now something had changed. Enrique came over to her. Crouched down, laid both hands on his knees, tried to wipe away his tears. Tried to smile, only managed a crooked half one. Sofia, he said gently, just for her, your family too, okay? I'll take care of you both. Forever. Those words hung in the air, spinning.